This is the Retirement Solution Podcast with financial advisor Jon Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital.
When the market's down, we have talked about the notion of, the rule of market investments is buy low, sell high. Obviously, we saw dips in the first part of the year, John. So there was conversation about buying the dip, but that's not what we're talking about here right now.
No. I mean, are we talking about buying the dip?
No, we want to talk about a correlation with a tax advantage.
Ooh.
All right.
Yeah. You can turn lemons into lemonade. You can take those dips and then like guacamole and then just put some chips in there too.
There you go.
That's what we're going to talk about, really.
Okay. We're gonna make some strides
Maybe
here.
not guacamole.
And I was going to say,
I've got Latin music in my head. I've had it.
You're getting ready to go on vacation is what's really going on here.
If that's what you want to call it, vacation. Yeah.
John and his family are headed off to a trip in the islands next week. And to them, I say kudos. But first, sir, you got work to do. You got to earn your paycheck so you can afford that vacation.
Yeah, that still may not happen.
Let's talk about market circumstance and opportunities because, as we were saying, when stocks go down, some investors will push money into the market. It's doing the thing called buying the dip. But there was this article on marketwatch.com talking about how doing a Roth conversion when the market down is also like, quote unquote, buying the dip. So please explain how this works. Why are these two similar? And perhaps are there opportunities that we need to be looking at in the space because of dips we saw this year? Is that even an option now that the stock market has rebounded?
Well, we'll see, right? So it really is going to kind of depend on what kind of dips we are going to see, and or are we still? Is there still the possibility of having a recession out there? We haven't. No one has really completely taken that off the table, depending on how tariffs end up and what happens, internationally and geopolitically, right? Okay. So one of the things to understand is, and I read this article, and I think it got about 70% right. Okay. It got about 30%, maybe not exactly right. It talked about when there's a dip, that of course a lot of people like to buy. It's like, oh, well, the stock I wanted is like 9% off. Let me go ahead and jump in there. Some people may have seen that with Tesla, over at the beginning of the year. And if you look at that, Tesla's up quite a bit since then. And of course, lost it again after this whole, infighting between Musk and Trump. Interestingly, though, when you're thinking about doing a Roth conversion and buying the dip, here's my fear. A lot of people, it depends on what asset you're relocating, right? Because think about this. If you're down 10% in your Tesla stock, let me just use this in an example. 10% in your Tesla stock, you go ahead and you take that money and you convert it to your Roth. Now you're down 10% in your stock, plus you're down whatever your marginal and state tax rate is. Oh, that's insult to injury. So this is where if you're going to buy the dip and do a Roth conversion, it can be unbelievably smart, but you have to use risk arbitrage. All right, let's talk about that for a minute. This is a big deal. Hedge funds do this all the time when they're doing tax loss harvesting or they're trying to harvest tax gains. They do it all the time with their different properties and their different real estate and their different assets. Private equity does this all the time. But when you think about it, think about this. If you actually wanted to buy the dip and do a Roth conversion, you want to actually sell the asset that didn't lose that 10% in this example. You want to take a safer asset, usually like cash in that account or one of your treasuries or your money market account or one of your other safer assets that hasn't sold. This is an opportunity I see a lot of times for people that own some annuities, and they're like, this annuity isn't bad. It hasn't been that great either. Now that the market's taken a dip, why don't I pull out a free amount from this annuity, convert that free amount because you had no losses on that, and then you add a little bit of risk in the Roth. Now, why would you do this? Well, think about it, Heather. If you get the opportunity to not only have a 10% loss, all you're doing is you're taking cash that has no loss, and now you're going to buy an asset that has a 10 or 15% hit on it. When it comes back, hopefully, to even or better, you are automatically taking advantage of that tax gain from that situation. You're using what they call risk arbitrage. You're taking two different amounts of risk, and you're trying to make money on the difference. That can be genius. As a matter of fact, during the COVID crisis and scare that everyone had, there were many clients we did this with on some stocks like Churchill Downs back in the day. It was down like 60 or 70%. Since then, it's up like 190%. So imagine, don't sell that stock that you like, that Microsoft or that Apple or that Netflix or whatever it is, whatever that company is. Think about adding more to that position by selling an asset that isn't down or down at all, or use cash. By doing that, you get the opportunity to have tremendously better gains in the long run. Now, to balance things out over time, then you can decide if you want to replace that other stock in that traditional account. In this example, if we're talking about a Roth conversion, it typically means you're converting cash from that traditional IRA. You can consider rebalancing that later. Why would you do that? Because there is no tax aspect inside of the actual traditional IRA itself. There is no tax to buy or sell anything within it. So because of that, then you can rebalance it the next quarter, the next year, whenever your advisor says so, because that would make even more prudence. That way you're not doubling in our example, that Tesla stock. You're just buying it in the right bucket. That's called asset location, right? Okay. It's not the allocation. We're just putting it in a different location to take advantage of the opportunities.
All right. So risk arbitrage, asset location. Also, you were talking about some of the ways that we can do these things, John. It still all sounds very complicated
and people mess it up all the time too, right? Yeah. So they'll sell the wrong stock in the wrong place or put it in the wrong spot, and then they end up having a bigger tax problem down the road because they didn't look into, Medicare extra cost, or NIIT, which is the net investment income tax, or they're not looking at their marginal brackets, and they end up what they call bracket bumping, where they end up going, let's say, from the 22% bracket to the 24, from the 24 into the 32. It happens all the time where people have good ideas, but their execution isn't great, right? Okay. And so this is kind of one of those things, especially when you're going to try to get a little bit deeper, right? So when you're talking about tax code, you're talking about using arbitrage, you're talking about using different asset structures and location. A lot of times you're using asset shifting. Whenever you're doing those things, it's probably wise to either seek out, a CPA or a tax attorney, or find a skilled fiduciary that actually focuses on the tax bent. And by focus on the tax, I'm not talking about, they'll put all your money in a deferred annuity, la, 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 la. That's horrible. What you want them to do is understand, where does the tax code benefit you and where's your max? Because if you play in that range, our team proves it every day. The average bear who saved about $700,000 can put an extra $150 to $200,000 in their pocket over the course of retirement just by understanding those simple things, but executing it correctly. Knowing about it, but not executing it correctly could cost you more money, not even save you a single dime. So the question is that when you're thinking about, if I have an advisor, wherever they are, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, the bank broker, whoever it is, Fidelity, Schwab, wherever it is, the question is, are you getting the value for what you're paying them? Because most of those guys don't work for free. And so the question is, are you getting the value? One of the things that I want everyone to think about is any retirement planner, anyone out there that's trying to guide you to get to retirement and then be able to stay retired your whole life, what do they focus on? Because in our office, it's simply 5 things. Protect what you got, create an income stream, make it tax efficient, make sure that it goes to the people you want when you're gone, like a surviving spouse or kids or grandkids, and make sure that you got something to pay for healthcare that doesn't often include expensive healthcare, long-term care costs, right? So if you get those 5 things down, that's what you want. That's what allows us to sleep at night. That, to me, is the biggest thing we can understand out of all these questions about taxation or the markets. How do you put it all together, right? Anyone can do something good in a silo, but how does it mesh with everything out? That's typically where I find most people need probably someone skilled at that point in time. The
idea of good ideas, bad execution is such a real thing for so many investors, particularly, actually, tragically, with DIY investors, you would kind of expect it. But a lot of people that work with advisors have gotten bad advice because we've spoken about before. Yes. Okay. Buy the dip, the opportunities for Roth conversions, but Roth conversions don't necessarily work for anybody in any kind of market, work for everybody in any kind of market.
You have to do the math, right? There's a lot of people that they're gung ho. John, I want to do Roth conversions. Sure. They come in, our staff runs the analysis, and we show them black and white. If you do Roth conversions, there's a chance you're going to pay more taxes than if we just exploit the system the way it's built for you. And they're like, whoa, what do you mean exploit the system? I'm like, well, it's not complicated.
Yeah.
Roth conversions may cost you more money because of your income needs, where your assets are located, and the type of assets you have. It may actually be more expensive for you while you're alive or for your heirs to inherit than if you just don't do Roth conversions. And I've had people look at me like I've got 7 heads. And they're like, John, I've heard you on the radio for 15 years. You've always talked about getting money in tax-free. Yeah. No, what I've talked about is it wise to get money in tax-free based on your economic situation, based on your tax code and your needs, right? Because some people, you have saved way too much money. You're always going to have a tax issue. So is there a smarter way to get around the tax code? If not for you while you're alive, then for your heirs or your surviving spouse when you're gone. Often there is, but that requires advanced concepts, right? We're going to look more at trust designs. We got to look at more at some forms of life insurance. Are they correct? That's the way the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Kennedys have for years given their money to the next generations through the form of insurance. But we're always told, oh, that's bad. Well, if the richest billionaires on the planet have done that to get their money to their people, I have a hard time thinking it's all terrible. But it's not about one size fits all. It's about what is the right fit for that individual. Sometimes it's a Roth conversion. Sometimes it's buying the dip. But probably it's getting the right advice from someone who understands all those silos and puts them together so that you can simply understand. If you're doing it, why? If you're not, why? And how are you going to end up with more money in your pocket, right?
Right. How's it going to benefit your bottom line? This is what John and his team are working to find out with and for you at J. Hagan Capital. RetirementSolutionShow.com is our website and where to start the conversation. Understanding options and opportunities like buying the dip, Roth conversions. Could a Roth conversion end up costing you rather than benefiting you? This is the point of running the numbers, doing the math. John and his team ready to do that for you as well. We also have links posted in the show notes. You can just click there or again, find us anytime, RetirementSolutionShow.com.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solution Podcast with Jon Hicks. Begin the conversation about your savings plan with John and the team at J. Hagan Capital by visiting RetirementSolutionRadio.com. Be sure to listen to John's radio show, The Retirement Solution, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. on News Radio 840 WHAS.
J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is licensed in your state, please call 502-690-5635. J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency and does not provide legal or tax advice. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through J. Hagan Capital, LLC, NPN number 1882794.